sir.
All right. Thank you. This is Bill Horns calling to order the July 14th, 2022 meeting of the Transportation and Transit Commission. It is 6:31 p.m. Roll call. Bill Horns, I'm here. Micah Ladoucet.
Yep, here.
Thank you. Rich Tate.
Here.
Jason Strauss.
Present.
Michael Gurnitsky. Not present. Gabriella Gerhardt.
Here.
Elizabeth Ward.
Here.
So we have 6 out of 7 present. We have a quorum. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Thank
Second.
you. Rich moved and Elizabeth second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Agenda is approved. Minutes. The minutes that were in the packet. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting? Oh, there's Gabriella raising her hand. She moves to approve.
Oh, I'll move to approval, yes.
Second? Anybody?
I'll second. Second, yeah.
There was a second, maybe Jason. And all those in favor? Aye?
Oh, I have a comment, I'm sorry, I have a
You
comment.
do have a comment. I'm sorry. I'm going too fast.
I guess this is for Andrew, so I'm on page 4 of the agenda, page 4 of the packet, of the draft minutes. Under 9A, right at the end of that sentence before 10 comes up, it looks like it's like ends in the middle of a sentence, so it looks like maybe there's just a phrase missing.
Yep. Yep. I should have put an ellipsis there. You're right. Yeah, I can finish off that thought. Sorry about that.
Great. I trust that will be an accurate thought, but just thought I'll move to amend to add that extra phrase.
So you want to tell us what the phrase is? And I'm not sure where exactly that is.
Yeah.
By the way.
It's the
It-
last
it was-
sentence before 10.
It's talking about Promega land acquisition. He explained the ongoing process of acquisition and noted that he expects to, I think, resolve this quickly is what I was going to say there.
Okay. Resolve this quickly. We'll take those words.
I guess I'll just move it as a friendly amendment as
Yes.
long as no one has an objection.
That's good. So all those in favor of approving the minutes with that friendly amendment, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, we've approved the minutes.
I'll abstain because I wasn't here.
Okay,
You know.
thank you.
I wasn't here either.
All right, we have a couple of abstentions, Rich and Elizabeth. So on to review items, transit shuttle planning, and as you know, I sent around a memo both to you all and to the Friends of the Fitchburg Senior Center about this question of having a shuttle bring people to the civic campus here. And some of my questions, unknown to me, Andrew was planning an elaborate timetable. So unknown to me, some of the questions are answered there, and others, but having that in front of us gives us a good format, a good framework to talk about these questions. But before that, I'd asked Jill McCone to attend and be here. And Jill has been on this case of getting better transportation to the senior center for a very long time. And so, Jill, I just wanted to give you a chance to give your perspective of where we are and what's going on right now with transportation to the senior center.
All right, well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Bill. And Andrew, I just want to wish you best of luck. Super sorry to see you go. He's done a ton of work in his short time here, particularly on transportation, inner city transportation, obviously Madison Metro. So thank you, Andrew. Best of luck. Those are big shoes to fill. As Bill said, I have been an advocate for more transportation for over 25 years for the city, and obviously an unsuccessful advocate, but I just won't give up. I have written CDBG grants. I have worked with the Friends over the years to pay for supplemental transportation. I've held my own supplemental transportation contracts years ago to get people to and from the senior center. And that's way back when the city was a lot smaller. So kind of fast forwarding to today, and the needs are still there more than ever. When we discuss this issue at the senior center level, this is bigger than just the senior center now. And I think with the library and other facilities in Fitchburg, it was really nice to see some interest being taken by Andrew, by Public Works, and even City Council to look at more intercity transportation above and beyond Metro, because that's just not cutting it. It doesn't bring us down to Civic Campus. Metro Plus, which has the wheelchair accessibility, only follows Madison Metro by a quarter or a half a mile, so that still doesn't get you down to the Civic Campus. With the annexation of the town of Madison, we're going to be really, really desperate for more transportation. So what the senior center provides now are what we get from Dane County. We have no say-so about this contract. This is a contract that Dane County holds with the transportation provider to fund a bus that brings people primarily to the meal site. That's what the Older Americas Act money is for. That's what that transportation money is for, that comes from federal to state down to the counties, that say nutrition is the primary reason that we're going to bus people to the senior center. So they can get to the senior center sometimes as early as 10:30 to 11:30. They can stay for lunch and then they go home at 12:30. So this doesn't really allow anyone who doesn't drive the opportunity to participate in anything before or after lunch. We do try to cram a few little programs in, around 11 o'clock, hoping some of the folks that ride the bus can participate in those. But it's just really unfortunate that we have a well-supported city-funded senior center that's really only a small portion is available to people that don't drive. And so, as the discussion with the Friends, who have been such strong advocates, who are committed to helping with the funding of a bus, of a shuttle, of whatever, as Bill and I talked through a lot of this over the months too, I feel like it's time that we look at a bigger shuttle that really encompasses more than just older adults, because a lot of people need transportation inner city, whether it's connecting to Madison Metro, getting to the Civic Campus, getting to the splash pad. So again, I'm just here to listen. I will say I was sad to see Andrew, moving on, because I feel like in a lot of my years, it really was the first time I think that there's been a strong interest by the city, and nothing against former employees, that there was time spent on something that really could look at supplementing that Madison Metro. So Andrew has a great base, and I'm hoping the person that fills his shoes will pick up this torch and carry it. And so I appreciate Bill keeping this as a priority, and I feel like this is the committee where it starts. And so I'm here for questions or just to kind of stay informed. So okay. Thanks again, Bill, for inviting me.
And just to clarify for those that aren't familiar, there are now two buses, two shuttles operating. The one that's always been there for some time that you described, and now there's a second shuttle.
Through ARPA funds. So not only do I hound the city and try to stay on top of this, I'm always meeting with Dane County saying, can't you give me more hours? Can't you give me more time? Can't you give me a second bus? Because Fitchburg is so big, and because we don't have any other transportation, there's times when, there could be 15 people on the bus. That's not uncommon. On a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, particularly, 15 people that are all the way from Clayton Road to Williamsburg Way, Traceway, and it can go as far down. I think our furthest one south right now would be Irish Lane. That's a huge route. That's a lot of people. People were riding the bus for over an hour, which is against the contract. So I kind of leaned in on that. Well, thank God with the ARPA money, they said, okay, we'll give you another bus to transport people there and back. So really what that bus does, it doesn't give us any more hours. People still, it's just primarily around the lunchtime. It's just people don't have to ride the bus as long. So now we have 2 buses dropping people off between 10 to say 11 now. So they're getting there a little earlier, so those that do want to participate in exercise can. I mean, we were to the point where people got dropped off at 12 o'clock, and then the buses, you know, the driver's like, get back on the bus, it's 12:30, you gotta go. And, you know, when they're spending more time on the bus than they are eating, I was like, this is not a good thing. They come for social, they come for everything. So luckily with some of that ARPA funding, Dane County was generous enough to say, okay, Fitchburg, we're gonna give you 2 buses through next year. But again, it's still just around those lunch hour times. It doesn't give you, if anybody wants to come and do a yoga class at 9, if they want to stay and make cards or play bridge or whatever, stay for chess, you know, that goes until 1 or 2. That's not an option. It's still primarily lunch is the priority.
Right. And so the second bus runs through next year, so through 2023.
We'll have 2 buses through 2023.
Okay.
So it did give us some breathing room. At least I'm not getting a lot of calls and complaints of people saying,
Okay.
I didn't get there till noon. I was on the bus for an hour and a half. We were getting a lot of calls like that. So that has stopped, and that's really nice.
Okay.
But, you know, again, just looking at the bigger picture, not just older adults, but laying really a nice framework for the whole city to move around and enjoy all the nice things that Fitchburg has to offer. So.
Right. And could you, just for our benefit, summarize what you know about how other communities handle this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of communities like ours that, you know, the proximity, we're a little closer to Madison, but, you know, something like Stoughton where I live, you know, they have the shared ride taxi. So same thing, the county provides a bus for transportation. But then folks have the opportunity to have a shared ride taxi so they can get around Stoughton, you know, and go to Walmart and the grocery store and wherever they, you know, doctor's appointments. And then that too is just inner city. You know, the Stoughton shared ride taxi is not hauling people into Madison, so Stoughton still struggles with medical rides. Sun Prairie has the same thing. They have, you know, what we have through the county. They actually got the money and do their own transportation for the nutrition rides, but they have a shared ride taxi. Verona doesn't have anything. Middleton is lucky enough to have Madison Metro because they're really kind of downtown. So they have more transportation that's supplemented along with that county contract. Yeah, Gabriella.
Gabriella?
If I could just jump in, Bill. I've spoken to people in the city of Fitchburg that live in areas with bus service, and they actually take the bus to neighboring communities and use their senior center or their library services. So people are using the bus. They're just not, they're not able to get to Fitchburg, which is obviously a issue. And also, I just want to make a comment, Jill, as well, that given the fact that we have a temporary extra shuttle, it would be interesting to kind of collect some anecdotal data from the people that are utilizing it and the benefit of it, because it's kind of a short-term experiment in the benefit of an extra shuttle, right? So,
right. Yeah, I can easily do that.
Yeah, have some good information ready to go so that there's, as we continue this discussion, there's some information there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move ahead in a minute and go through, have Andrew walk us through his memo. But I did want to say about why we're doing this. We're not responding to a particular charge from the city council, but we do have a broad mandate to advise the council about transportation planning. And this is a central issue in transportation planning. And my sense, after listening to Andrew's presentation earlier, was that listening to council comments, was that there's a whole lot of need to clarify what really would happen here. And I think that goes to Andrew's memo. I think once we work through this, we'll have more ideas about that. But but before we go to Andrew's staff memo that lists the timetable, were there any other comments from commission members about this, about what we're doing today and where we're going with this?
I have a question. Was that second bus, did you say through 2023 or until 2023?
Through 2023.
Okay. And I agree with Gabriella. I would love to see some data.
Other comments? Well, I think with that, we might as well, Andrew asked you to launch through your timetable and what it all means.
Yeah, I can share my screen. All right. So, yeah, I worked with Jill pretty extensively, kind of working through this. I also talked to Misty about as far as making sure that we were lining up with budget cycles. And so really what this does is maybe lay out the next steps. I'm certainly leaving out some detail that I'm sure you guys will fill in as you go, but maybe this gives a broad brush overview. And so spring and summer, really this is this budget season now. So we've already kind of included the CIP project that's going to go to council this month for approval. And then staff is planning on including operating budget for a transit study in 2023. So we wouldn't be applying for operating budget yet, knowing that right now the plan is to start this service in 2024.
Okay, question. I had a question on that. Is that so? You're anticipating that the mayor's budget will include this item, or are you saying that this is something that will be the mayor will be asked to include?
Yeah, the latter. Yep.
Okay,
That staff has included it. It's unknown whether or not that will be included in the mayor's.
So there will be of course, down the line, a time possibly to lobby or to comment. Maybe we're not a lobbying function, but we can be a commenter about the need for that operating study. So that's all.
Yep. And I will note that Woodstock does have kind of a rotating cycle for these sorts of applications. I believe if you apply in June, then you get funding in July. Or if you apply anytime before June, you get funding in July. If you apply anytime before December, you get funding in January for a transit study. So it's certainly, they offer kind of a generous 80-20. So really, we don't have to put up too much money to do this.
So the 20 is the city part, 80
Exactly.
is the state part.
Yep. So it's definitely an option as a match. And so, but certainly if we do that, we'll have to fill out some internal approval forms and on base. And then starting in the winter, if we do get funding approved for that, then we would start, restart kind of intercity transit study. But this time, make sure we're including this additional option of a civic center shuttle, and look into some of the service parameters that we kind of laid out there of what that study should include. And I think we've talked a bit about this. I know the committee of the whole, talked a little bit about what options are. But I think the intention, I don't want to just have another study, study this extensively, but at the same time, to do something kind of comprehensive that we can show council that, we've really done our due diligence and this is the service parameters that make the most sense.
So this transit study will not just be about a shuttle. It'll be about any and all other ways of addressing intracity transit. Is that your?
That's certainly
view?
Something for debate. Right now, as it's currently envisioned, it would be a refresh of what the 2015 study did. Was basically looked at fixed route, shared ride taxi, a flexible route, but did not include the civic center shuttle. And then kind of weighed those different options, did a lot of pro cons, a lot of modeling of what potential users would be, and then kind of came up with a recommendation. This would refresh that with new data, but then also include that. So, really we've talked before about the metro transit redesign left some gaps, certainly with intra-city transit, and those might be just general users trying to get from anywhere to anywhere else in Fitchburg. And then separately, but also, a similar use case would be folks trying to get specifically to the Civic Center and to maybe potentially other locations, nutrition locations, pharmacies, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And so theoretically, right as envisioned right now, this study would kind of look at both of those use cases and look at potential options to solve those.
Okay. Okay, so it's possible that the study could focus on just this issue, or is it your belief, and I don't know where Gabriella went. Gabriella, is it your sense that the study should be as broad as the 2015 was in terms of options?
So I guess I don't have a specific, I have some ancillary comments to that. I'm curious, because because I assume that the grant applications have very specific specifications. I also wanted to point out that, well, okay, so number one, when is the grant due? It's due by the end of December, is that correct?
Yeah, so it's a rotating cycle. I'll just go quickly. I believe that says, for consideration of the January 15th award, you must apply by December 31st. So certainly, I think over the fall TTC meetings, honing in on the scope of what that, if it is approved in the budget, honing in on the scope of that and getting a crisp application ready for by December should set you up fine for getting, that grant funding in 2023.
The 2023 budget will be adopted, I believe, on November 1st, so just for reference. So hopefully, if we have the funding in 2023, there'll be time in the lead up for an application due by December 31st. Does that sound right, Andrew?
Yep, that would make sense. Yep.
Reasonable. And then I guess my second point is that I did include funding in ARPA, and it was specifically for to explore park and rides, which could be part of the transit plan, but there is potentially the ability to use ARPA money. Anyway, just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. And I'm sure I should know this. The 2015 Intercity Transit Feasibility Study, I assume is available online for any of us to review?
Yep, yeah, it's a clickable link there. You should.
That link right there will take me there, okay.
They'll bring you, so I'll bring you up quickly.
Okay, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but maybe a little bit, that there isn't more of a focus on this issue of getting people to the civic campus. I had a sense from listening to the council discussion when you spoke a couple of months ago that there was a lot of interest in that. But I guess I'm not sure. It's up to the council how broad a study they want. But you're talking here about a broader study.
Potentially, and certainly that's up to TTC and council to hone that in if necessary.
I guess if I may.
Yeah, please.
Well, I guess this is like a complicated. I'm just gonna kind of. There's a lot to this, but I've talked a little bit about how I think there's potentially an opportunity to provide intercity bus service to solve some of these. It did, explore a park and ride opportunity where we were expanding the number of people that use bus service to get in and out of Madison.
Okay.
One of those lines could be down Fitchburg Road further, which could solve our problem of having service go all the way down to the specific campus down Fitchburg Road.
Okay.
But it would be a broader effort to encourage bus service in and out of the downtown area of Madison.
Okay.
So I guess I think they're different issues, but I think there is an ability here to kind of consider. Obviously, a shuttle is kind of a short-term option that would be good. I do hope that the long-term option is to expand Madison Metro service, which reaches both of those goals, and also would potentially extend paratransit service so that people can access, potentially like kind of essentially a shuttle to all parts of the region that has metro service rather than just Intercity with Fitchburg, because there's a limit to those shuttle services. And I do think that that's on different timelines, right? But I don't know that we can accommodate in our budget an intercity bus line, although I do think we could consider that, but maybe we do a shuttle as kind of an interim period, and then we expand the bus service at a later date, and it's kind of a stepwise process. So a park and ride could be a part of that exploration, in my opinion.
Okay. All right, thank you. Andrew, go ahead with.
Oh, sure. So that would be, so still a lot to determine as far as what that feasibility study would do, but that would theoretically take place next spring in 2023. And then we would request information from contractors, depending upon what the options are that are finalized there. Consult with contractors, there's plenty of contractors both locally and nationally to get some general cost per hour information that will help us build kind of our RFP in the fall. Ideally, you get crisper numbers, but I think just the way that the budget cycle would work, I think it would be ideal just to get some information at that point. And we've already gathered some information as far as what has gone into the preliminary numbers based upon other cities but a lot has changed in the last few years as far as availability of drivers, so I think, and inflation, so just want to make sure that those numbers get updated. And then certainly in the spring, proposing new shuttles if needed, if it's a larger than one shuttle service. Certainly in the CIP, that would be a needed ask. Applying for grant funding through 5310, so that's a program specifically administered by the MPO, the Madison MPO, but has state and federal funding, and that it would be for an 80-20 split for. Oh, okay. Oh, thanks. I can share. Yeah, if that would be helpful to share, so in case you guys don't have that at home.
What's going on?
I was,
Oh.
yeah. So a 5310 grant funding would provide 80-20 split again for the capital purchase of these shuttles. There is some red tape along with that, basically because it's a federal program. There's annual inspections, that sort of thing, but it's certainly nothing that we can't prepare for. I've talked to Mark and Rob about getting that, so I think that's definitely possible. And that would definitely provide a lot of that upfront capital for us to fund those. And then in the summer, propose operating budget for those services. So really, we're talking about, all the things that the vehicles need, as well as the staff members, which is really a big cost. It could be something like 20 to 30K per shuttle, depending upon, how many hours you're talking about using that shuttle. So certainly, a large cost, but then really that could be folded into the operating assistance that we get from WISDOT. So we're currently getting 60% of our gross operating costs covered by WISDOT. If we added any service that provided transit to all, as public transit, is defined, then it can be included in our annual operating assistance application to WISDOT. And then that could be covered up to 60%. So that certainly would be a good option as far as covering the cost. And that 20 to 30K was net cost, kind of with our back and napkin calculations. I'm interested to see how costs have changed, but that's kind of to give you a frame of reference of what we're talking about. And then the next step would be in 2024 to actually submit this to council for approve basically put out an RFP for a transit provider, get quotes back, and then select one to start service, and whatever that service might be, depending upon the results of all these studies. So any questions about that? Does that make sense?
There's a lot of steps in this process.
Yeah, sure. Yep. And some of these are more staff level of just kind of laying it out for internal staff. So
I'll just jump around a little bit. I was a little surprised to see that Metro Transit would buy these shuttles.
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly why that's the case, but the 5310 funding through the Madison MPO typically comes with an agreement for Metro Transit. I think because they purchase other vehicles, and so it's just a kind of an easier mechanism.
So remind me again what the 5310 refers to.
So that would be the capital grant funding that's specifically tailored to seniors. So if this service is, at least in part, focused on getting seniors to anywhere they need to go, then you could use the 5310 funding. There is, I believe it's 307 funding for capital funds for public transit vehicles, for just general public transit vehicles. That goes directly through WISDOT. It's a little more complicated, so I think if it does serve seniors, which I think that's the intent of kind of combining these users, I think that's an easier way to go.
So I'm curious, this item in the current CIP for buying a van in 2024, I'm starting to understand that as a kind of a placeholder thing. I mean, it sounds to me like if all this happens, the city's going to be providing money to Metro Transit, or there's going to be some kind of grant funding through one of these programs, and they're going to buy the buses. I mean, I'm guessing that the mayor's proposal is not, doesn't have much detail to it, or what is he proposing? I mean, is he just saying, we're gonna put up that much money towards having vehicles? Is basically all that you could say at this point?
I think Gabriella has her hand up.
I could comment on that a little bit. So and just from my perspective, so the CIP, it's kind of like one of the big official planning documents for the city. So for capital improvements, obviously, so there's a limit. If it's less than 10,000 or if it's operating, it's not included. So when a project is in 2023, 2024, that is like imminent, and that means that if that passes council, if it's included in the mayor's proposal, that is currently being explored and planned by staff. And technically, anything in the first 5 years really is meant to be kind of an imminent project that really truly has to be explored. Anything in the back 5 years is kind of theoretical. So if you're putting something into 2024, so the amendments to the CIP come out on Monday. So assuming there's no alder putting an amendment to remove the shuttle or to move the shuttle, it is likely that it will stay in 2024, which means that staff is going to move forward with this probably outlined plan as Andrew put forward. So although it's still theoretical, it's kind of directive to staff, and that's my understanding.
Okay, and that would be in the 2024 budget, city budget, I suppose. Where in here, and maybe it's obvious I am not seeing it, once the study is done, intercity transit study, there's a decision to be made, I assume. I mean, we're going to have a study result that's going to say, well, these are some options, things you could do. At some point, the city has to decide what it is going to do. Is that internal process laid out here, or how will that work, Gabriella? And the reason I ask is I think that goes to what is our role on this commission. Should we be asked at that point to look at the study and make a recommendation? Will we be?
So, from my perspective, I think the committees in Fitchburg are advisory to the council, right? So we choose. We get amendments referred to us, but also the committees get to choose what they bring to council if there's a recommendation. So, for example, tree advisory is developing a tree protection ordinance that will then go before the council to be adopted.
Right.
Any committee can work on those sorts of things. So yes, I think if this committee wants to work on that plan and get more specific about proposing something to the council based on the transit study, I think that's very much something that we can and possibly very much should do. But there's no prescribed process. But if we want to advocate for it, I do think that would help push it forward and be more likely to be top of mind.
But
be a priority for the.
If we don't, I assume the council will have a committee of the whole meeting and take an hour to talk it over? I mean, I'm just not clear how that, at some point a decision gets made based on the recommendations of this transit study, based on the options in the transit study.
Yep. And you could certainly have the approval of the transit study be a council action item that would come to TTC first and then go to council for final approval.
Yeah.
And then theoretically, the recommendations from that study would be pursued in the subsequent budget season.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
Bill, I have a question.
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
Jill.
Or more of a comment. I think because I've been working on this solo for a really long time and just advocating for seniors, it felt really appropriate that this discussion really involved this committee, because you represent more than just older adults. Like, I'm here maybe representing older adults, and this is that's my job, so I'm biased, although I've worked for the city a long time, I am very committed to a lot of things for a lot of ages. But I also think that it's important to get buy-in from all ages. When the Friends talk about buying a bus and having it for the seniors, I said to Bill, we can get a bus. I could easily get a bus. I could get it because the Friends would be helpful in funding. We can get the 80% from the DOT. But we can't ask the city to pay for a driver just for older adults. Like, that doesn't seem appropriate. It's not good use, it's not good fiscal spending. And that, I just don't see that as really a viable option. But is there a belief from this committee, from city council, that more transportation is a priority? And so, if this committee said no, at this point, we don't feel it's appropriate, we don't want to do it for any age, that I might not like, but I feel like we need to engage more than just Bill and I presenting over adults. And I know Madison Metro definitely engaged a lot of people, but there's also a lot of people that weren't able to come to those meetings, or they're hard to engage. Oftentimes those that need it the most they're not there, they're not hearing it, they don't have the accessibility, they're working nights, they can't Zoom. So anyway, just from a city standpoint, as a department head, it would be nice to have this committee really weigh in heavily on such a big study, because you're representing more than just older adults like myself, and I think Bill, speaking from a friend's perspective too. So just wanted to share that comment.
Thank you. I mean, I agree, and I would recommend to this group that we track this closely, this sequence of events that Andrew has laid out. And with the particular question of helping the city decide, its council decide which of several options it should pursue, because I assume the study is not going to say, this is due north, go that way. It's going to say, these are 4 ways you can go, and a bunch of information about each one. And I think at some point, it should help the city council if we could put some effort into guiding them. But I'm curious to know what other commission members feel about that. I'm basically asking what should be our role as this comes along. Should we play a proactive role, or just be responding to the city council asking us to review the study results? Rich?
I'm impressed. I think we have a lot of moving pieces. We have a lot of various buckets with funding. I've seen on the plan commission where projects were denied because lack of transportation. Like there was several years ago a senior housing south of here that didn't have any service. I'm so glad to hear Gabriella talk about a park and ride, because that's been something I've been wanting since first started in here. But I would like to pursue this. I would like to start breaking it down in a project sense, so we have different items that we want to look at each time. So we look at things like maybe it is the splash pad, maybe the library, maybe we look at some of the details and sort of step back and look at it from a higher view of what are the constraints, what are we going to accomplish, how are we going to get there. And I would like to see us be aligned and have so much information ready for the council that there's no argument against what we're looking for. And I'm impressed with what I've been seeing. There's a lot of work going into this. There's some things I don't quite follow, which is for later, but I would like to see us proceed with this.
Okay. Yeah, Jason.
I was just going to say that I think the purpose of committees like this is to be heavily involved and provide recommendations, because council members can't be experts in every single area. They're relying on committees to comb through this stuff with a fine-tooth comb, look for red flags, look for gaps, look for overlaps, and make recommendations so that it can streamline their council meetings a lot faster, because there's no way they can be an expert in every single aspect of the city services. So I think we have to provide them a recommendation.
Okay. Other comments on about the role of us in this process? I have one comment. It strikes me that this doesn't allow a very long time between. I mean, somebody's going to bid to do this study, and there's not there are not very many months between the time that study goes out and the time that supposedly we have some results from it. My sense of studies is that they can take a while, but I think 3 months or whatever is implied in this is kind of short. If they're gonna do a thorough review of what's here, I don't know, though. Anybody else have a thought about that? Because it talked just specifically, summer 22, the budget includes an item for a study. Spring 2023, award the contract to a consultant and complete study. So we're talking about in the spring. The
Yeah,
contract
I think-
is issued to do a study and the results come back, so it's a pretty short.
I think the intention is before May, you would get some indication of whether or not you need multiple shuttles, so that staff can put that into the CIP as a staff request.
Yeah, but the issues here are bigger than, do we need multiple, I mean, this study is really about what is the solution, short and long term, to getting people with, from here to there within the city. So I just think that's a pretty short amount of time. That's just a comment.
Yeah.
And would the study include a specification of a deadline? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly, I think if TTC want to focus on the scope of this study
yeah.
in subsequent meetings, you have a few meetings, I think, before then
Yeah.
to hone in on what you want at the end, which I think the 2015 Intercity was, they had an implementation plan. I think they had some useful information there. So you could model it off of that and then maybe just drill a little bit harder to say, we want a specific recommendation, and that's going to be what's approved by council, so that there's no lack of clarity on what's the next step.
I'd be interested in your other comments, but I think that's a good way for us to spend a little time, is reviewing the study proposal, so that what's put out for bids to do a study, it includes our input, in terms of the timeline of the study, the questions we're asking. I think it's really important to get that clarified. Other thoughts on that? Gabriella?
I thought I'd have some thoughts. I guess that they're based on a lot of the stuff that's been discussed. So I do think we should work on this. I just also want to point out that the council did adopt the transit study that we worked on over the last few months. And that included this information about the shuttle. And it also had the timeline as being short. So I do think one of the first places we could start is just like, I know we all talked about it many times, but we did pass this transit study, and we can very much let that drive our work, because the council did adopt this. The other thing I'll note is that during the ARPA discussion, when we voted on amendments back on March 22nd, during a council meeting, the senior center shuttle passed unanimously before the council. And then also note that Andrew did a great presentation at the committee of the whole on April 27th. And the first hour and 15 minutes or so was Andrew talking about transit. We did talk a little bit about Madison Metro, but we also explored microtransit. That's a great presentation that I think all of us in TTC should watch. But also, it's interesting because you'll get some information about where the council members stand and what questions that they have. So there's very much some information to be gleaned about where the council is at the moment. So that's a lot of different notes, but just things for the council to consider and maybe wave forward to these issues and learning a little bit more. I'm glad that we have that recording of Andrew going through all this for perpetuity. I think it's great.
I watched it. Was that chart you just showed, was that from the...
Oh, sorry.
That's not the 2015 Intercity.
This is the 2022 transit plan, so...
Oh, the one we worked on.
Yep,
Okay.
no, we just worked on. So I was just referencing what Gabrielle was referencing. The two action items related to that: providing demand responsive service to senior center for seniors and potentially to other destinations for other users. That's a complete feasibility study in the short term. And then determine feasibility of service to Civic Campus and other priority areas. Also short-term study complete. So it's definitely a council approved, call to action to do this study.
and
The,
to do
the
this study.
specifics, I think, are up to you.
Okay. I personally think there is a need to look closely at what we're gonna be asking for in this study, so that the study will really guide decisions and not just lay out options.
And certainly from a just logistical standpoint, over the next several meetings, if you hone that in, that could give staff what they need to write that RFP, and then council will obviously be approving the contract, so that would be kind of council's mechanism to finalize that contract. There's other ways to do that, but.
What is the timeline for developing that RFP for this study?
I think between now and January, really. And really, the reason we put January as kind of the soonest was just that it's not included in the 2022 operating budget. There's certainly options, as Gabriella mentioned, if there's ARPA money available, you could make a budget amendment now to get that started sooner, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there, when would we have something to look at, sort of, as far as the RFP?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I won't be writing it tomorrow, unfortunately. I think, I can certainly start to pull together some other ones from the past that we had.
Well, I don't want to give you a bunch of work to do on your last day on the job, but
sure.
Actually, it's something I wanted you to do the next month, double up, do two. But I do think we have to have something to look at. I just think this RFP is going to be influential in terms of what information we have before us, or the council has before it, and therefore it's going to drive decisions somehow. So I think we need to be looking at that. So is that something, a request, do other people agree with that? By the way, I should ask. And is there just consensus that we should ask, who would we ask in the city to?
It'd probably be my successor. I can definitely put a note
We don't know who that is
the
yet,
minutes. I believe it's Kevin Dranaski. Is his name.
It's somebody that's here now?
Not yet. So he'll be starting in late July. He'll be there at this meeting, I'm assuming, between him and Anna. One of them would be here next month. And I can put in the minutes for kind of a TTC request.
Well, I think probably the best thing would be when he gets here, I think there's time to just have a conversation with him. But you could alert him that we have an interest in talking about what will be the substance of this RFP for the study. At least I have an interest in that.
Okay.
Gabriella?
So just as a point of reference, the Resource Conservation Commission, which I also sit on, there has been recently approved money for a sustainability plan, which is very much integrated to what that committee does. And that committee has done a lot of work to be very specific about how the committee sees that plan going forward, which has influenced the RFP being developed by staff. So there's definitely other committees that do something like this, but I think potentially us suggesting what we'd like to see in the RFP, making that recommendation based on, our conversations and our representing the people of very much something that we could and I think should do. And I guess one other note in terms of the transit study funding, if it's not included, I will encourage the mayor to include it in his budget. He does ask the alders what they are advocating for early on,
right.
So make sure I call that out. And I will also very, very likely put it as an amendment.
If it's not in, you'll try to amend it, put it in.
Yes, I will do it.
Yeah, because it does seem like a fairly critical step in this process. All right, other people have comments right now about this, where we're at. I don't know if, I think this was helpful to me to understand this process. I really appreciate this timeline. But I think we need to be looking at this timeline now as time goes by and thinking about what it all means. But I think if nothing else, we've reached agreement here, with consensus on a committee that we need to be fairly intensely involved in this process. Others?
One last,
Yep.
so I did send out the link to the committee, to the committee. So you can find it on YouTube. It's very easy to find, but I have the link.
What did you send out? You broke up.
The committee of the whole
Oh, yeah.
presentation that
Presentation.
Andrew did, yeah.
That was, oh, good.
Yeah.
Should be in your email right now.
And Jill
Yeah.
also presented that meeting, so there's lots of useful information from Senior Center as well.
Yeah. No, I've watched that meeting. There was a lot of information there. And it was interesting to hear the comments. And I would say, though, my sense of it was that, you know, the council recognized an issue here, intra-city transportation, but I don't think I really heard a consensus about what to do. It was a thank you very much for all this, highlighting this problem and for letting us know the options, and here are 35 different random thoughts about the thing. So I think it was left a little bit inconclusive, which it couldn't be otherwise, but okay, continuing with our agenda.
One more thing
Oh, yeah.
on that. One thing I remember when the 2015 study came through, and it seemed a lot of it was focused on the bus systems itself. This goes much more beyond just getting Madison Metro. We started with some shuttles. We had the free rides. We did a lot. I don't know if anybody is familiar or remembers back to that study. What failed? What was an accomplishment on there that we still are using? I guess, sort of step back and look at what we did last time around to see what we can avoid doing this time. Does that make sense to anybody? But I don't know. I don't really have a sense of, other than just, I think there were a few failures that we've heard about, but I don't remember any of the major successes, and a lot of it was dependent on Madison Metro. I think this time we're taking it by ourselves, but I'm going to go back and try to look at that study to see what, and I'm asking, does anybody remember anything from that previous study or the results or initiatives?
I was involved in that study, and, you know, it ended up being a ride share. We contracted with a provider who, you know, did an on-demand pickup. From my point of view, it wasn't organized. There wasn't city staff that really were specifically assigned to oversee this. There were so many different elements that got, I think, just put on people's plates, from marketing to, you know, finance, figuring out how to collect fees, to who's taking the calls, to the provider. I don't think really being that prepared for such endeavor, and it wasn't super successful because there were people that didn't get picked up. There were just a lot of issues with the provider that was contracted that I think once word got out that things weren't going that well, people stopped using it. It was hard to schedule a ride. Some of the drivers' cars were not good. Sometimes it was a bus, sometimes it wasn't. Drivers got lost. It just, you know, it was a good attempt. I mean, the study, you know, that was the recommendation that the city took, was to do the shared ride. I call it shared ride, but I felt like from the get-go, it wasn't going to be successful because, you know, I look at, you know, Andrew and this committee, and, you know, it's hard for me to be patient because I waited so long, but truly, in all my years of looking, you know, and being involved, this time I feel like it's right. You know, you guys, Andrew, you know, council, they're doing diligence and really looking at what the community needs, and that one came quick. It was along with a lot of other things, but I just don't think that it was a lot to put on a lot of staff, and a lot of stuff fell through the cracks, and there wasn't a lot of accountability, and it was just a little confusing. I think this time around will be a little bit different. Yeah.
That was with Richwood, wasn't it? Okay.
That was
So-
the provider, yeah.
So was that ever written up? I mean, is there a document that says, this is what we tried and why, and this is what happened, and why it did or did not work?
After action review type
Yeah.
thing?
Well, there was feedback, there were surveys of, why people used it or didn't use it, or who used it, I don't know, if Public Works has those studies. The nice thing is Anna, the new Public Works Assistant Director, was very involved in rideshare, because she was the transportation engineer when that came about. So I moved, that part when Anna was coming on board and Andrew was leaving, I was like, okay, at least we've got some history coming back, because she was very involved in that, and I think, she might echo my thoughts about, it was a lot, it was overwhelming, there wasn't a good plan. The thought was really good in theory, it was perfect. The reality of how it got rolled out just got a little wonky.
But that project, that rideshare thing, was an outgrowth of this 2015 intercity transit study. That was sort of the
Correct.
upshot of it. The study was done, and then let's do this, and it didn't quite work, but maybe some people think something like that is,
Well,
should we try it again?
well, that's what I want to avoid, stepping in the same pile again,
Well, I think there's other seasoned providers. I think, there was a lot of, people want to do online, calling online and scheduling their rides online, and they just weren't set up for a lot of that stuff. And one size doesn't fit all, but, fast forward now, 7 years later, technology is different. A lot of people have access to technology. There's a lot of other seasoned providers. Unfortunately, I remember we didn't get a lot of, I think Lyft and Ridgewood were the only two that came back with a proposal. And unfortunately, Lyft, they couldn't do wheelchair accessible transportation, so that eliminated a whole section of the population. Maybe this time around, we'll get more interest from other providers because there are more out there.
Well, I would ask, we could consider including in this transit study RFP that they will review that effort. I mean, I think it would be helpful to have a review
sure.
of why it didn't work, or what parts of it did work, or why it might or might not work in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, this has been helpful to clear the fog for me a little bit about this whole issue. I hope others as well. So I think if nothing else, we have some agreement to stay on this case as a commission. And with that, we can go to the next, unless there's another comment, go to the next budget item, or the next next agenda item is a report from the department.
Yeah, so I didn't include a whole lot. Last month, we did have a question from Michael Grunetsky asking for plan versus actual costs on North Fitchburg Road. And so I included in the packet, this is, I can share my screen. And so this is some information that was included in a prior, I think, one of the previous budget updates to this project. And you can kind of see, I think the initial idea for this project was a pavement replacement project. So certainly that's, we did a lot more than replace pavement out there. So you can see, 4 million was kind of the all-in estimate there. I believe that this number on the top represents the total budget. You can see that some of the bubbles below talk about real estate, talk about some of the stuff outside of just the roadway construction. But it's not clear to me exactly, which elements. So let's just assume that that's the total budget as we move forward. And so you can see basically successive budgets that increase the scope, increase the dollar amount. I believe that there was, inclusion in TID, so that it was more of an economic development project as well. And then I kind of added in, so on the left, this November 2019 was basically kind of the estimate going into the bidding of $23.4 million in construction plus right-of-way and engineering. And then, so that was really where we set up our contracts of of kind of the all-in budget. And then the actual, after we did auditing, our audit kind of last spring, or earlier this spring, we were under that. So we ended up under the final budget, but obviously higher than the original budget, knowing that the scope has changed quite a bit. So hopefully that helps. You know, it's always good to do kind of these postmortems and kind of understand how projects change. I only came in, you know, kind of towards the tail end, so I'm not the definitive resource on this project, but I certainly can't help answer questions if there are some.
A lot of information here, but I'm still not exactly clear. These are the amounts actually spent
So
in a given calendar year, 29 and
No.
27?
So these are basically estimates and then actuals throughout the project life. And so going from January 2016, you know, the full project cost estimate was 3.85 million. You know, as you start to add scope, that estimate goes up to February 2019. I think the plans were really starting to come
So
along.
the numbers across the top are
Yep.
estimates of
Yep.
what it should cost.
And then going to the next page, we you know, bid out our contract, we got our consultant on board, and so that kind of shows estimated costs once we had our contracts, that November 2019, so kind of individually, so that overall it was 29.84 million.
So that's still an estimated cost.
That was still estimated, yep,
For the whole project or for that year?
for the whole project, yep.
But then spring 2022, it's a lower number.
It's a lower number. So basically, when we build some contingency into both our construction, our engineering, and our right-of-way, it wasn't quite enough for the right-of-way, but it was to cover the other two, and so we're lower than our estimated budget because we didn't use up all that contingency. So, you know, I think in the end, we kind of wrangled it and got costs under control, and you know, we got this large-scale project built. There's certainly lessons learned. I'm probably not the one to share those, go into too much detail, but
Yeah.
you know.
Well, Mike is on the Public Works
Yep.
Committee, isn't he? So,
I can definitely share this with Bill, and he can talk to it a little bit
Okay.
more before Public Works.
okay, so that's up to Mike if he's satisfied with that. That's a lot of information. Anything else as far as a report from the department?
That's all I had. Unfortunately, there were a few things like the parking ordinance that just wasn't quite ready. I have forwarded that on to our city attorney, and so theoretically that will be reviewed and could potentially be seen as early as, you know, later this year. And so some of that groundwork has been laid, but it isn't quite ready to
Okay.
be action. So, and that's all I have.
Okay, and announcements?
So yeah, this will be my last meeting. As I mentioned, Kevin will be joining you or
Okay.
Anna next meeting. So
Okay.
you know, please welcome him. I'll give them my phone number. So if there's any questions, and
Where's-
obviously we have these great recordings of all our past discussions.
Yeah,
so.
I'd be fascinated to listen to that. You don't make him listen to that before he actually signs on the
Right.
dotted line.
Sure. Yep. That's fair.
Where is he from?
I think he's worked at Wistad and worked at some consulting
Oh,
around here. So I think
okay.
he's in the area.
Okay, okay. What's your last day on the job?
Tomorrow.
Where are you going?
Wow.
I'm going to the TOPS lab at the University of Wisconsin.
Well,
Jason-
congratulations
Jason
on,
Johnson's hand.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Jason.
I would like to put in the minutes that the committee thanks Andrew for all of his hard work.
Thanks, I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I agree. I know we all agree about that.
If I can just add something, I worked with Andrew a lot. I called him many times. It was on a lot of extra meetings with him. Andrew, I think you're wonderful. I think you've done an extraordinary job. And it's actually wild how much you've done in your tenure here. Like, there's so many projects, so many road projects, huge things, metro redesign, just wild things that you were dealing with. And really thank you for taking this to me through those really, really big projects. And you will be very, very missed. So thank you so much.
Thanks, appreciate it.
All right. Any other? Thank you for that, Jason. Any other announcements?
Oh, just one thing, I forgot. Construction on South Sain is likely to be starting before our next meeting or around our next
okay.
meeting. So just keep a heads up.
Okay.
for that. Sorry.
All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Anybody opposed? Thank you for attending the meeting. See you next time.